Hi guys, so today I'm just going to be reviewing what we covered in class as far as double exposure photography. I'm going to be working with this image of a clouds, a photograph of myself, which is very scary, and a photograph of New York City, which is where I was born. I'm going to kind of go over what we covered in class, but using these three photos, two of which were found on the internet. I made sure they were really large, and we're going to start by going to File, New, and creating a new 11 by 17 inch document that's 300 dpi in a tabloid format that's vertical. So we should start with something like this. We're going to double click the background to make it into a layer, and I'm going to go ahead and pick a pastel color that I feel comfortable with and use the fill tool, G for fill, and fill it in, and now we've got our background. Next thing we're going to do is go to the photograph that you've taken of yourself, and what we're going to do is use our object select to see what kind of a job it does figuring out where the object is. And we're going to make a layer mask down here in the little layers button. We're going to click on the layer mask, and we notice that when we zoom in, it's not a perfect mask. Things look a little bit cut out and not so natural. So we're going to double click our layer mask or select and mask. We're going to click either one of those. I am then going to zoom out a little bit so you can see. I'm going to click on the this button right here, the second tool below, and it refines the edge, so it'll allow the computer to look at this edge and see where it might make some decisions like the ears and the hair. But before I do that, I'm just going to click the refine hair and see what happens. And you notice that it did a really bad job, so I'm going to undo that. But it's always good to test to see if this button will actually find the hair that's needed. Another thing that we try before we start painting the hair back in is to go to the radius area. And what we're going to do is turn on the smart radius. And so you can see what's going on. I'm going to show you the edge of the radius as I move it up. And so what it's doing is it's looking here where the mask was, and it's trying to make decisions inside of this edge that is 4 pixels. I'm going to bring it up to like 10 pixels, and then I'm going to show you without the edge what it's doing. And it's kind of like going around the edge and seeing if it can make a better decision using AI to what belongs to the image and what doesn't belong to the image. I feel like for this image, 10 is a little high, so I'm going to lower it back down, and you'll notice it's trying to do a good job, especially around my beard area, and that's what we want to go for. You can always shift the edge inward a little bit to tighten up the crop. Not too much, because this is a human and you don't want to take too much off of them. Once you're happy with what you've got, just hit OK, and we will now move this tab out of the way, and we will find our tabloid size image, and we will move our image into this area. Take a look how it looks. If we need to refine the edge more, we can do so, like double clicking the mask again, and again just drawing. I'm going to use my brush tool to make it smaller. Just drawing in this area will tell it to look harder at this area in order to make some decisions about this mask. So I'm just kind of drawing it, trying to get something that looks a lot more believable. And you can see right around my beard there's this white area, so I'm drawing again with this refine brush tool, and it's kind of like figuring things out. Otherwise, looks okay at this point. The hair looks a little bit better for sure. There's an issue here, and you can kind of see it if I use the regular brush tool. There's like a hole here, and I can fill that using just straight up white, right? And so we know how to work inside of the brush, inside of our layer mask here. All right, let's zoom out and let's transform this so that it makes sense for this composition. So I'm just going to Command T and then bring it up and hit the return button once I'm happy. And here is my image with the layer mask. Let's bring in this image of the skyline of New York. Now, what I could do and what I did was selected for this one, the object selection tool didn't do anything. As you can kind of see, it was just a complete failure. Just too much stuff. Command D. So what I did was use the quick selection, increase the size of the brush a little bit, and I just drew starting from the bottom and working my way up until I had a nice selection of buildings, like something like this. If I went too high, I held the Option key to take away from the selection. And so what I was trying to get was a nice skyline. And then when I hit the layer mask, as you can kind of see, that's not so bad. And then what I did is just went in with the lasso tool or with the quick selection tool, and just selected these things and took them away. Honestly, the lasso tool or just the eraser tool on this mask would work wonders. And then after a little bit of work, here's what I got. So as you can kind of see, it's not the perfect thing, but it does give us a nice outline for the top, and that's what I'm looking for. All right, so I'm going to throw this away. So spend a little time if you have something complicated like this for your work. Now I'm going to take this and I'm going to go to my untitled area, take this guy out of the way, and I'm going to move this into my composition, as you can see, and we're going to transform it. And what I'm going to do is make it quite big. I want it to kind of like be large enough where it's occluding me and my face somewhat, so that the image itself feels like it's coming out from the top of my head in some of the in this case here. So I've got it really large, as you can kind of see how big that is, right? And you can use either side, whatever side works best. Then I'm going to hit return, and you can see it didn't do too terrible of a job, right? The next thing we're going to do, because we have this image, we're going to need to throw this mask away because it's all done. So we're going to throw it in the trash and apply it. So that was the next thing we did. And then what we did was take our mask from our person from our photo, and I hit the Option key. Holding the Option key, I was able to drag and duplicate that mask onto that new layer, the layer of the skyline, as you can see right here. So now we have my face, but the skyline is inside there. The next thing we did was went through the different types of composite modes. So we looked at ones that we thought were pretty good to work with, and I selected, I think in this case I'm going to select I really like hard light. So as you can kind of see, the hard light gives it brings in a little bit of this thing. Now the nice part is if we unlink the silhouette mask here and the video and the actual image of the sky, we can use the move tool, V for move, and we can move our skyline around and see how this is looking by just moving it and seeing if there's some better choices. I'm going to go back from hard light to normal just so I have that, and I'm like, maybe this actually looks way better. Something like that. Okay, at this point, it's time to start destroying these things. So I'm going to select both of them and Command J to duplicate them. As you can kind of see here, I've duplicated those masks. I'm going to take these two guys, holding the Shift key. I'm just going to put it under my color. These are going to be my backup, just in case I need them. Okay. Now remember, you unlink this image mask here. So if you do anything to this, it's going to move around, but the image mask is not going to move. But if you move this thing around, you'll see that the image mask no longer lines up. So just be aware, if you need to relink things, just make sure you're aware of that. All right, we're going to start with the city, and we're going to select our image map. And now we're going to use the brush tool, B for brush, and we're going to change our brush selections to make it a 0 hardness 300 point brush, right? Maybe even bigger, maybe 450. And what we're going to do is brush into the white area here using black, and that'll allow my face to be revealed a little bit more so that it kind of comes out. We talked a little bit about changing the opacity so that it's not so direct, so we changed it to about 50, and we're going to make the brush a little bigger. And now we're able to brush back in a little bit of my face so that my face kind of shows up through the composition. I'm being careful to stay inside of the boundaries here. But so for instance, that's what we've got. Now this is us erasing the mask that we use for the city, right? The next thing we talked about is selecting our mask for our head. Let's turn off the city here. And now what we can do is brush black on the mask, maybe make it a little bit more opaque here. And you can kind of see with my soft brush, I can actually remove the top of my head. So in a lot of ways, what we're doing is like removing things that we don't need. And I can undo like I did if I'm not happy with what I've got. So now I'm removing the top of my head. And so when I look at the image, you can see that the top of my head doesn't show up. Now we're going back up here to the image of the city. And what I'm going to do, where there's black up here, we can't see through it, but we're going to remove that black by painting white. And now you'll notice that the image of the city is coming into focus, right? Now I have the city coming out of my head, but it goes a little too far. So I'm going to use a smaller brush and paint with the opposite color, right? And maybe with a higher opacity. So something like this. And again, I'm painting with black to make things go away. And I'm painting with white to make things come in. As you can kind of see, here's a building with white. And I'm trying to be just somewhat artistic about the whole thing, right? I'm not trying to like do too much where all of a sudden I blow out my selection here. And I'm going to go back and forth, right? Bringing in my face, maybe my glasses, those kinds of things here on the, let's make this a little bigger. And you're just going back and forth on these areas to bring these two different things back in and out, right? And let me just undo this. So here I can kind of bring in the glasses, bring in a little bit of my shoulder, just so we have something going on. But if I don't want something, I can just use the opposite. Just hit the X button and things go away pretty easily. You see? Next thing we're going to do is bring in some clouds. So in this case, I'm just going to bring these clouds in directly. So I'm just going to take them out of the way here and just bring them into my document and transform them till they're about like this. Boom. I am now going to use select color range, and I'm just going to select the blue areas. We've done this before. Holding the shift key down allows me to select multiple blues. Try to get as much of this dark blue and a couple of the little bits of light blue as possible. Change my fuzziness so that I get just the clouds. And then I'm going to make a layer mask, and obviously that needs to be inverted, Command I. And now we've got pretty good clouds, but they could be better if we select the clouds and change our composite mode to screen or lighten. As you can kind of see, lighten works really well. So we've got our clouds, and now all we need to do is I'm going to throw this layer mask away because we don't need it anymore. I'm going to apply it. And now we're going to make a new layer mask, but this time we're going to invert it so that it's completely black. And we will use our brush tool to bring the clouds in by brushing into this layer mask these clouds that we just created. You can kind of see how that works. Since I really like this layer, I can jump it and move it underneath and then move it around. And now it's this layer is now behind, and I can do the same thing. I can modify or brush in whether, take out some clouds and brush in some new clouds in a different area. Let's see how that looks here. I think it needs to be higher. Here it is. There we go. And you can see how that's brushing the clouds in. So we have like the person in the clouds. Now, moving these clouds around, bringing them down, changes the nature of things. Now, we're using the normal composite mode, but if you want to change it to different types of composite modes to see how that's looking, I really like the darker color. I really like, let's see, this hard light looks pretty good, especially on the textures on the face. None of the other ones really work, although I do really like the normal one. You know what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the soft light or hard light for this one, but I'm going to duplicate this, Command J, jump this, and make it normal. But now with the normal, I'm throwing this mask away. Or I'm keeping this mask actually. Cancel. And what I'm going to do is anything on this mask that I don't want to see. In other words, I want to only have the normal part like down here and not up here. So on the mask, I would paint in black up here, and that allows just the, you can kind of see that allows this to show through to this darken area or the hard light area. And that's how we use, oops, I was painting on the wrong thing, painting on the mask here, brush. And that allows us to kind of use two identical things, but one works differently than the other. You can kind of see how that's working. And once you're pretty happy with the composition, you have a three-dimensional look, don't forget to go File, Save,